Hello and welcome to today's presentation, Creating a Productive and Efficient Grower QAP Relationship. Today's webinar is being presented by Virox Technologies, makers of shield disinfectants formulated with accelerated hydrogen peroxide. You will have your opportunity to submit questions by entering them into the chat section located at the right-hand side of your screen. Please enter your questions at any time throughout the presentation. Our team is standing by to make sure they get answered. So without any further ado, let's get started. I would now like to introduce Sami Majadma, CEO and CTO of Certicraft. So over to you, Sami.
Thanks, Laura. Hi, everybody. I hope you guys are doing well today. Cool. So, yeah, I want to chat about what you can expect today before we dive into this thing. So first, I'm going to give you a little intro on who I am and why I am standing here giving a webinar before you today. Then I'm going to get into a presentation on the topic, kind of giving you my perspective on what I think leads to a great relationship between QAPs and growers. And we'll give you a few examples of different things you can do, but the real meat of today's conversation is going to be a discussion based off of whatever you guys share in the chat. And yeah, we want to discuss all kinds of concerns, challenges, successes that you've had in facilitating relationships between QAPs and growers to make sure that everybody is walking away feeling great. Because I think real solid examples are what's going to be most effective for we're just really giving good inspiration and empowering people to kind of address whatever is coming up at their various facilities. So first off, who I am. I'm Sami, and like Laura said, I'm the CEO of Certicraft, and we at Certicraft are on a mission to make it really easy for growers to stay on top of all their records and to stay audit ready. And yeah, I guess we've built a platform that's focused on saving people lots of times and lots of work. And through the 3 years of working on this project, I've become a real expert in figuring out how to facilitate relationships to save people lots of times, how to facilitate sharing information across teams, across facilities, across licenses. And that's kind of what has led to me. So without further ado, let's get right into it. And actually, I'm just going to check to see if I can see that chat. Yep, I can. Great. Cool. So in today's talk, we have two different players. We have growers and we have QAPs. And I'm going to use generalizations here when I talk about each of these players in our game. For the purposes of this talk, growers are people who love growing cannabis. They're very nerdy and technical when it comes to plant biology, when it comes to gardening and creating the best bud that they can. They spend a lot of time and energy working on that. And in this new licensed world that we're in, now growers are being asked to track all kinds of additional things to stay on top of all kinds of paperwork. And for most growers, it's not necessarily something that comes super easily to them. A lot of growers, they're growers because they love gardening, they love farming. They don't love paperwork, and so there's a lot of challenges around that are emerging now. And for teams that have QAPs as well, which is many teams out there, the quality assurance person is generally the person who has put together the SOPs for the facility in question, ensures that people are on top of said SOPs. Their biggest responsibility, I'd say, is to ensure that the cannabis is consistently produced at a high quality that is safe for consumption for the end users. Oh, is there an issue going on? I see video feed is frozen. Can you guys hear me? Reconnect worked. Okay. Can I keep going? I'm going to keep going. Okay. Greg says yes. Thanks, Greg. Salum, I'm not sure if I pronounced your name right or wrong there, but thanks for interacting. Yeah. So where was I? Yeah. So and then for most facilities as well, QAPs tend to be the people who are in charge of generating the records and the reports and submitting the monthly CTS report, submitting the B300 report for the CRA, and yeah. So that's kind of like the two general roles that we'll be discussing when we're talking about growers and when we're talking about QAPs. Now, the regulations are really, really open-ended, and that's what leads to a lot of the challenges that take place. And, the regulations are very specific in certain aspects, like, you have to record your inventory. There's particular numbers you need to track. You have to do things in accordance with GPP, which means you have to have be monitoring your moisture levels in your storage rooms, and you have to be doing calibrations and sanitations and so on and so forth. But it's very high level where the regulations are. They don't tell you in the specific detailed way how you need to do each thing. And so what this means is that there's countless different ways to set up a quality management system. And when I say quality management system here, I don't mean it in the sense of something like Isolocity, like a platform to let you stay on top of your quality management record keeping, but rather the overall structure that the quality assurance team or the quality assurance people in your team will put together to ensure that everything's done in a very high level manner. And every facility that we've worked with, and we've worked with a lot of facilities, we have 35 customers today signed up with Certicraft, and we've talked to many others in the industry, and no two facilities that we've talked to do things the same way. Every single team's got a either drastically or slightly different variation on a whole myriad of things within the quality management system that they set up. So this means that sometimes you can lead to a pretty frustrating experience between quality assurance people and growers. And I don't necessarily mean frustrating relationship in the sense of, oh, I hate you, like not that sense, but more where there's just a lot of back and forth, and the QAPs needing to always ask the grower for things. The grower's confused about what it is that they need to be tracking, how they need to track it. Things are being missed as a result of that system that is set up. That kind of frustration. And of course, that kind of frustration can then lead to more of that personal, like, you get on my nerves kind of side of a frustrating relationship. And that's, of course, no fun. And I'm sure every team wants to avoid that, because having that kind of friction in your team is no fun. And yeah, so today's webinar here and the discussion we're going to have is going to be all about how can we avoid that? What can we do to create a productive and efficient relationship between these two very, very key players on any kind of cannabis production team, where there is a huge amount of overlap in terms of their responsibilities and what they need to be recording, what they need to be tracking? How can we make sure that despite that overlap, everybody is playing to their strengths? And for me, with my perspective and what I've witnessed in this industry so far, and in other industries outside of this, because I'm leaning on a lot of different backgrounds here, it really comes down to one thing, and that one thing is user experience. Now, you may have heard the word user experience before, and it's most often used in a software interface sense, and I'll explain that definition shortly, but that's not the way in which I mean user experience here. I mean it in a different way, and I will get into that explanation next after the first one. So let's first discuss what user experience generally means when somebody says that in the world of software. So user experience is the experience that somebody using a piece of software, an interface in front of them, what's their experience of using it? Is it straightforward and easy? Does it make sense to them? Is it something really convoluted where they're getting stuck and frustrated and they just have no idea what to do and they keep trying and never get it right? And I'll share some examples, because I think that'll help clarify what I mean by user experience even more if you are not on the same page yet. So let's start with a good user experience. A good user experience is Google Maps. When Google Maps first came out in the early 2000s or whenever it came out, it was when you were using a computer, you would move your mouse around. I'll hold a mouse. You would move your mouse around. You'd click. I'm not going to click because then I will switch slides. You'd click and hold and move the map around in a way that like just intuitively made sense. And if you were maybe an older person who didn't grow up with computers, maybe somebody had to show you that you'd click and drag. But then once you were shown that, it clicked right away for you. Pun not intended, but I wish it was. And yeah, and then, you know, you'd scroll the mouse wheel and it would zoom in and out, and all these things just very, very quickly clicked for people and became a really great user experience. And then, you know, when smartphones came out, it became even easier because now you had these gestures you could do with your fingers where it just felt really natural and fluid, and the map moved with your finger in and out and rotated and panned and so on and so forth. And so that's an example of a really great user experience where it just clicks right away for people. And, you know, with children, they don't even need to be told how it works, like just right away that makes sense to them. And then the flip side of that, a terrible user experience would be something like let's say literally any ERP out there. Like I'm sure a lot of you guys listening in here today are probably using an ERP at your facility, and most ERPs have, you know, huge numbers of menus that you can dive into, and each menu you click on has 20 submenus, and each submenu has its own set of a dozen submenus, and each thing that you click on opens a window that's got 50 more options, and you can end up with like 8 different cascading windows, each of which have countless paths you can go on. And that's something that's, you know, most ERPs at most companies across all industries. I'm not just talking about the cannabis industry here. I'm talking about all industries. ERPs are known to slow teams down by about 20 to 30% every single day because their interfaces are so convoluted and the user experience is so bad. You know, even on engineering teams, like one of our co-founders at Certicraft, he's a mechatronics engineer, and he used to work in the semiconductor industry. And there, a team of engineers who were using ERPs to track all the chips that they were producing for various CPUs and GPUs and whatnot, they were slowed down by 30% every single day because of how hard the ERPs were to use. And these are very technical nerds. These are like mechanical and electric engineers we're talking about. So with all that being said, now we're going to talk about the definition user experience that I mean in this context of creating a good relationship between growers and QAPs. And in this context, let me back up a bit first. So in the first definition of user experience, these are systems that are being created for a large number of people out there. And the goal is to have a system that no matter who is coming to use the system, as long as they're within the demographic that you're targeting, that it will be something that's easy for them to use. That's if you're focused on user experience. It's a goal of yours to have good user experience. Now, that definition, that way approach of thinking isn't really necessary for a specific team, because when you're talking about an individual team, you don't care about like the broader cannabis industry and what works for everybody as a whole. You're not looking for that lowest common denominator. You're looking for what's going to work for your specific team. And at that point, it becomes all about the personnel. It becomes about the capabilities of each individual, what each person is comfortable with, and so it becomes a lot more of a conversation around just like having each person at the team really speak up about what's been frustrating them so far, what's been confusing them so far, what's been going really well for them so far. And just having an open discussion where everybody puts everything out there on the table and you collaboratively, in a very inclusive manner, come up with alterations or an entirely new structure or system so that that relationship can be really fluid and straightforward. And there's no right or wrong here in the sense of like this solution is going to be right or that solution is going to be wrong. But there is a right or wrong in the sense that if people are confused and frustrated and there's countless back and forth just to get a simple piece of information across, then that's probably you probably don't have the right system. That's probably a wrong solution that you've picked. But if everybody is working to their strengths, nobody feels like they're wasting tons and tons of time, and you know, information isn't being missed. Everybody feels confident that they can trust the data they're looking at. Then that's probably a good system. And what's a good system for one team might be a terrible system for a different team. So I just want to stress that it really comes down to the individuals involved and making sure that whatever structure you have in place works really well for whoever is there. So let's get into some examples of what this might look like. So for this example, imagine a bigger facility that's got an ERP. Upper management has decided we are using an ERP and we are not changing from it because we like the data analytics that comes with this, and we don't care how hard it makes your life. That's this company. And so the QAPs and the growers have been struggling. They're somewhere between a rock and a hard place. And the grower, every single day, they spend 3 hours just trying to figure out, well, where the fuck do I even put this information in? And you know, they waste 2-3 hours every day doing that, and then they don't even get everything into the system because they just give up at some point and they're just like, fuck this, and they walk away. And the QAP is pretty frustrated because they know that information that should be there isn't there, and they're having to go after the grower to be like, yo, what did you do with those cuttings? What did you do with that the stuff in that curing jar, or so on and so forth. And all around, you know, everybody's just getting frustrated, and the frustration is really about the system. And even though the grower and the QAP might be getting frustrated at each other, the grower doesn't like that the QAP just is constantly hounding them. The QAP doesn't like that they're constantly having to just get information that should be there already. But really, it's about the system in place. So for this particular facility, like a better system that they can implement to really facilitate their relationship could be something as simple as Post-it notes. Let's pretend that this QAP, in this example, they're very technically minded, and for them, this ERP is really simple to understand. And what takes the grower 3 hours every day to not even do properly, the QAP can do in half an hour and not miss anything. And so maybe when they talk, they kind of realize that, hey, maybe grower, maybe every day when you're done, you can just write down on a Post-it note exactly what you did that day. I took 150 cuttings from this batch of mothers. I planted 400 seeds in this room, and yada, yada, yada. And you just write it down on a Post-it note, and then you go to the QAP's office, you put the Post-it note down on their desk, and that's it. You're done, grower. You've taken your 3 hours and you've brought it down to a 15-minute writing session. And now the QAP, every day at the end of the day, they go through that Post-it note, and then they put in the information within the ERP. It takes them half an hour. It's all done properly. They know that they're not missing everything. And now all of a sudden, everybody's happy because for the grower side, the 3 hours they were wasting went down to 15 minutes. That was just straightforward. They gained 2 hours and 45 minutes of extra time to do their work, and they were already overburdened there, so that helped big time. And then the QAP is happy because now they're not missing anything, and they know they can feel confident in their information. So, you know, this is a pretty low-tech thing that this facility did that made a huge difference for them. Let's go to another example that's a bit higher tech. So this facility here, there's the growers and QAPs are similarly like not they're using paper, let's say, to track everything. And there's been a few times now where either water has been spilt or humidity in a room has affected the paper that was still sitting there that hadn't gone to the office yet, or paper fell behind a desk and wasn't found for weeks at a time, and they got in trouble in an audit as a result. And so they've realized, you know, papers don't really work for us. But at this particular facility, their budget is really tight. They want to use a system like Certicraft, say, but they don't have the budget for it. And so they gotta be clever and creative and come up with something different, because just paper's not cutting it anymore. So maybe for this team, what they do is the QAP here is also technical. So what they do is they create a bunch of Google Forms. You know, Google Forms are free to use, and each Google Form is going to correspond to a particular thing that grower needs to do. For example, take cuttings, harvest plants, take plants into the drying room or out of the drying room, and so on and so forth. And the QAP is going to make sure that they're tracking every single piece of information that they need for their records with a QMS that they've set up. And one nice thing about Google Forms is every single answer you fill out becomes a new row in a spreadsheet that gets created. And then if the QAP, you know, they could create an additional spreadsheet that then automatically sums up and takes all that information automatically from all of these forms. So they can have a pretty powerful system system with a relatively small amount of work. And then to make it even easier for the grower, what they do is they print out a big poster paper, and in that they have a bunch of titles. It'll say like take cuttings from mothers, it'll say plant seeds, it'll say transition veg plants to flowering, and so on and so forth, reduce plants, prune plants, and each of these titles will have a QR code next to it. And so what the grower does then is every time they want to do one of these tasks, they take their phone and they scan the QR code, and it opens right to that form, and then they just fill it in on their form, they hit submit, and they're done. And for this team, this works magically. The grower is stoked now because they just scan the thing. There's no more trying to find the right paperwork. There's no more concern around, well, the humidity is going to affect the paper. And the QAP is happy because they're getting everything in a streamlined manner. They've skipped the step of having to type all the information in themselves. And so everybody's saved a bunch of time, and everybody is happy now. And so that's another example of a possibility. And the third and last example that I'm going to give here, it's going to be our own plugin for the software that we make. So Certicraft, we've made a compliance platform that makes it really easy for growers to stay on top of their records. It guides growers through all of their compliance requirements. It generates all the reports that they need every month, and as a result, saves growers dozens and dozens of hours every single month. And we've essentially created the best user experience available today in Canada for grow teams. Isolocity is a QMS in the digital sense, where they've done what we've done for growers for QAPs. They've digitized a system where you can where a QAP can kind of create their flow for whatever QMS they want to implement. There's a document storage, so you can have your SOPs in there, and you can have version control for that as time goes on. You run your trainings from within there, and so on and so forth. You can have kappa reports, deviation reports, all that jazz. It's basically everything that a QAP needs. And both us and Isolocity built our system to GMP standards. And we met earlier this year and kind of realized, hey, we've both created best-in-class experiences for QAPs in their case, growers in our case, and there's very little overlaps in our system. So why don't we create an integration and make it so that a team using both of our systems can have our two systems talk to each other, so that if a grower does something that's important for a QAP, it ends up in the QMS right away immediately without it having to be double entered. So this is actually, I think, the first time that we are even announcing this. I don't think it's been public yet, so you guys are the first to know that Isolocity and us are building an integration now, and so that's an example for a team that does have the budget for a system like this, that wants to use something really opinionated by teams that have spent years now really perfecting user experience that they've created, where a lot of the busy work is going to be taken out of the equation, and all the reports and records that you need are going to be generated for you automatically, and that's going to be great for a lot of teams, and it's also not going to be the right fit for other teams, and that's okay. And I think what I want to keep stressing is that thanks Laura. I think Laura shared there the one pager that we just created. That's the first time that anybody outside of our two teams is seeing that. So you guys are the first to learn about what we're putting together there in our partnership. But yeah, I want to stress that there's no right or wrong. Again, like it's all about what's going to work for your team, and to really be inclusive and to try to get everybody on the same page before you make any kind of decision. Because at the end of the day, the goal of creating a good and productive and efficient relationship between growers and QAPs is to make sure that everybody's needs are being met. Within reason, of course. If a grower's needs is to never record anything whatsoever, I don't want to track what I'm doing, that's not going to cut it in the licensed world. But also, most growers in the licensed world, hopefully that's not their attitude, because they're probably in the wrong industry if that's how they want to do things. Unless there's a QAP who's also excited to be there with them and track everything they're doing. If that's the case, then maybe that works. So yeah, that's kind of it for the presentation part. Went a bit longer than I thought it would. I hope that wasn't too much run on either. I want to open it up, I guess, to the audience now, and I think Troy is going to be jumping in here to. Oh, there he is. Look at that. To kind of share questions that the audience has been sharing. Last but not least, if any of you guys do need to run out sooner, and there's my contact info right there, so feel free to send me an email if you have any questions, or you want to follow up on anything, or you don't really feel comfortable asking something in in front of the audience as a whole. And yeah, Troy, I'll hand it over to you.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you very much. That was great. First question is actually for me. A lot of times when we're trying to implement our products, we see a lot of this, relationship between them, and sometimes it's not as good as it can be. So what are some processes that you would suggest that would help smoothen that relationship between the QAP and the growers?
Great question. Processes that would facilitate the relationship. So there's something we do in the software world that we have implemented at our team that makes a huge difference that I think every single team out there can use to just smoothen any relationship out, whether it's the grower QAP or on a broader level. And it's something that's called a retroactive, commonly referred to as a retro. And a retro is essentially a weekly meeting that you would have, usually within the context of a specific project you're trying to undertake, to just discuss what has gone well, what has gone badly, what you can improve, and what you in how the previous week has gone, and to just have like an open discussion where it's not about laying blame or doing anything of that sort. It's just about really being honest about what you felt has gone well or not gone well, to celebrate the things that have gone well, to address and come up with better alternatives to the things that haven't gone well, and to create actionable items for the next week so that you can improve the experience for everybody as a whole. And having that kind of continuous feedback loop where every single week you guys are setting aside half an hour, whatever it is, just to talk, just to have a meta conversation about how things are going. If you are actively shifting your relationship, the QMS, whatever structure you have in place to improve things because they have been bad, they have been problematic, it's really crucial, especially in the early stages, to keep just having a continual open conversation and to proactively have that feedback cycle coming in. And, maybe you get to a point where for 2 or 3 weeks, you have this retroactive meeting where there's nothing bad that needs to be improved on. Maybe at that point, you're like, you know what, we don't need to do this on a weekly basis anymore. Let's shift this to be a monthly meeting now where we talk about the previous month instead of the previous week. But I think that's just a great thing to be able to do on a regular basis.
For sure. Yeah, communication is key, right? Okay, here's some questions from the audience now. So, given the rise of digital paperless inventory and record-keeping systems and our mandate to retain documents, is there a requirement to retain documents as hard copies? Do the regs prescribe any requirements for digital archiving and retention?
No. Wait, who asked that question?
It was Catherine Capsos. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name there.
Hi, Catherine. Nice to meet you. No, there's no requirement to have hard copies. There is, however, a requirement that if you are audited, you have to have your records on site. So what that means as it relates to digital systems, especially ones that are online, is if your internet is down that day and you can't access your online records, Health Canada is not going to care about that. They're going to tell you that's your responsibility to have your records there. So tough luck that your internet's down. So what that means is if you've got an audit coming up, then you better make sure that you've downloaded all the records that you need in the week leading up, so that if worst case scenario you have some kind of power outage or internet outage, that you have access to those documents there. That's kind of the catch, so to speak. It doesn't have to be hard copy. You just have to have them physically available at your facility if you are audited. Catherine, do you feel like that kind of answers your question, or do you have any follow up around that?
I'll let you know if she types back in. We have a lot of questions. Okay. So the next one is I don't know who this one's from. So here, Dale Carney was asking, how long have you been in live production environments?
Oh, at Certicraft? Let's see. Our first licensed micro was licensed in December of last year. So about a year now as with licensed facilities, and we're up to, I think we got 12 licensed facilities now, 35 total using our system. And that's both standards and micros. But we started our pilot project in April of last year. So April 2019 is the first time somebody was actually using us, and then December 2019 is the first time somebody was licensed and using us.
Awesome. You just answered 2 or 3 other questions there as well. So perfect.
Great.
We have another one. Do you have any suggestions for how to get buy-in when implementing a new system?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's hard to say, right? Because it all comes down to like the personnel who are on the team, right? Like, I mean, I think the most important thing really is just to make sure that everybody's needs are heard. Like if you have everybody who is involved in touching whatever this quality management system is, if you have all of them be at the table so that each person can voice their concerns, they can voice what's frustrated them, they can voice what's gone really well for them, and you guys can collaboratively come up with something that addresses all those needs, where you're all meeting in the middle in some kind of way, where you're giving some, because it can't just be what you want, but you're also being given some, so that a lot of the frustrations and the needs that haven't been met are now starting to be met. Like I feel like that's the best way to get buy-in, because then everybody, I mean, I guess, if you have somebody who's a total dick on your team, then maybe that's maybe that's not gonna quite work. But but if I know, I think most people tend to be adults and wanting to like make things actually work better. And if everybody feels like the team as a whole is trying to help them meet their needs, and I think that's the best way to get buy-in. Because I think what happens a lot on teams, especially on bigger teams, is somebody higher up makes a decision, and the people who are lower down, who are going to have to live with the consequences of that, haven't been consulted at all. And that's when you'd have like a lack of buy-in. When a manager just decides, hey, this is going to make my life easier, and they haven't considered that, hey, you've just added 40 hours every single month to each person on your team's workload. And when that happens, like, of course the team's not going to buy into it. They're going to complain. They're going to hate it. They just had their workloads. They were already stressed, and now their workloads have been increased. So yeah, just make sure that everybody's had a chance to share what matters to them, and to actually listen, not just to get feedback and then ignore it completely. And I think that's the best way to ensure that you get buy-in from the team as a whole.
That's awesome. And little actually follow up from me. So from the Shield side, when we go into facilities and we're trying to get buy-in to implement our products, a lot of the times we plan a trial, and that is usually the best way for everyone to understand and to see the value the product can bring. So are you able to do anything like that, or do you have some kind of trialing demos or anything like that?
Like a trial for Certicraft, people who are interested in using it, you mean?
Yeah, like, are you able to do anything like that if anyone was interested?
Yeah, we do demos for anybody who's interested. We basically, I mean, the way Certicraft works is if somebody reaches out to us because they're interested in collaborating, is first we'll jump on a phone call. We'll just chat about, hey, this is what we do. This is like the scope of our project. Let's learn about you. What do you do? If it sounds like there's a good potential for a fit, then we're like, great, let's have a demo now. And then the demo is basically myself or Nick, who I think is in the chat here, will kind of walk the team through like a 15-minute quick demo. And then we let them kind of dictate what they want to see, where they want us to go. And it's kind of an opportunity for them to use Certicraft through us as the people who are actually controlling the system.
Yeah, I think that's great. It usually helps a lot when we do that as well. So we have a question from Mary Eve Carrier. Do you have a French version of your system?
Good question. Not yet. It's coming soon. We've just had a couple people from Quebec join our list of customers, and they have told us that they really want to help. They love Certicraft. They came to our previous webinar that we did and found it really, really awesome, and they were so thankful that they offered to help translate our software for us. So we have that lined up, and it'll be happening once we finish and release our GPP module.
Awesome. Very great. So from Dale Carney, do you provide cost of production tracking?
And by that, do you mean like
or charge
like
per
soils
month?
And nutrients and all that?
Just sent in a kind of a follow-up. What do you charge per month? Is there a setup fee? So probably just trying to understand the price structure of Certicraft.
Cool. Yeah. So Dale, I'd say I'll give you the price structure in a moment, but any other things related to specific features of Certicraft, like that's not the point of this webinar. So follow up, send me an email there to my email that you see in the contact, and I'd be happy to set up a call with you so that we can get through all of your questions. The price structure as a whole, though, for micros, it's $500 a month for up to 5 users. For standards, it's $1,300 a month for up to 5 users, and support is fully included in that. We don't charge anything extra for that, and our customer support is actually amazing. Every single customer gets exactly what they need for that, yeah, and then we can talk more offline. Just send me an email, and we'll get into all your specific questions about features that we have.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I had a couple other questions about cost per gram and stuff like that. So if you'd rather keep that offline.
That kind of breakdown. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's more our integration with Isolocity. Isolocity does a lot of that. That's they're tracking all of your inventory that's ancillary to cannabis. So with the integration, then yes, there would be that kind of tracking, but we don't do that upfront ourselves because we're not tracking all of your various inputs and your things that are coming in. We're just doing the cannabis regs required that require tracking.
Awesome. Then I have a question from Catherine again to everyone in here. I think it was always in the chat. Sorry, it wasn't private. So the question for everyone, and Sammy, you as well. Out of curiosity, how big is your facility? How many employees do you have? How big is your QA team? And how much of a role do they play in day-to-day operations? So Sammy, I know you've seen a lot of facilities. I have as well. If you have any info to share there.
Oh, it's a huge variation. I mean, you have everything from like small, tiny micros where it's just like literally a 1-person or 2-person operation, all the way up to like facilities that have literally 100 employees, 25 of whom are involved in like the QA and production side. So there's and then of course you have like the Aurora and Tilray and Canopy Growth, which are even more massive, but I doubt any company of that level is kind of present here today right now. Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to what you're trying to do as a team, how much you're growing. Like, if you're a standard that's growing, I don't know, like 10,000 kilograms, then you're probably at a level where there's enough value that you're doing that you really want to have a dedicated QA team. And maybe one QAP is not enough, but maybe it is. It all depends on the capabilities of each person involved. And, there's going to be a bunch of parameters that go into it. The capabilities of people involved, the size of your facility, the capability of the owners. If the owners are growers or QAPs themselves, then that kind of mitigates a lot of the need to have like a larger team because they can handle a lot of that. And I guess also like how much workload and how, because there's different like thresholds that I've seen to how much people are willing to deal with. Like I'll just talk to the micro side for a second. So we have some micro cultivators where they're really just trying to do the bare minimum that's required in order to be compliant, and so they're getting by without dedicated QAPs, because on the cultivation side you don't need a QAP actually. It's only as you get into processing that's actually a requirement. And then we have other micro cultivators where they have a dedicated QAP just for the cultivation side, because they want to be as on it as they can with that. And for those teams, they'll have like two growers and one QAP, and then a few other people that are like not in any specific role, but they help out across the board. And so you'll have a team of 5 essentially that's touching the production in some kind of way for a micro facility. And there's nothing right or wrong with either approach. It's just up to each team and what their values are, and just being true to your values.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've also seen as well if when facilities expand on kind of, as you kind of mentioned, outside of cultivation, if they're doing extraction as well, there might be, a separate QA team for both of those activities. So I guess there's no real answer to your question, but it will kind of depend as we said there. I think I saw one more question. So GPP requires input. Well, the question is, does GPP requires inputs to be tracked?
Yes. Yeah. And Certicraft does that. Yeah, we don't have an inventory management system around the inventory side, but we facilitate the record keeping required there. So yeah, anything that's not water that is added to your plants has to be tracked, or added to literally anything that you are producing, not just plants.
Very good. Don't see any other questions. Laura, I see Laura here, so I think that's all of them then.
Yes, I think that does conclude our webinar today. So thank you so much to you, Sammy, for such an amazing presentation.
You're welcome.
And thank you for everyone for joining us today. It's always really exciting to see so much activity in the chat. So we hope you all enjoyed today's webinar, Creating a Productive and Efficient Grower QAP Relationship. If you have any other questions, please visit shield.ca, and you will also receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording of today's webinar. So thank you so much again for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed the webinar.
And just one last thing I'm going to throw out here. I'm just looking through the chat right now, and I think I'd agree with what Victoria had to say there. Victoria Molev, not sure if I pronounced your name right. You can always have more people who are ensuring that you're staying on top of compliance. I mean, that's one thing about this world. Like, if you screw that up, you run the risk of losing your license. So better to have people involved that are dedicated to ensuring that is done well than to not having enough. Though with that being said, budget constraints are legitimate, especially as you're on a smaller team. So it all comes down to that. Like, what are your values and what's the best you can do within the budget constraints that you have while ensuring that you're still compliant. Anyway. Thanks, okay. Laura. Sorry to interrupt your little outro there. You got to do another one now.
All right. Well, that concludes today's webinar. So thank you again, Sammy, and thank you to everyone for joining us today.
Thanks, Virox and Shield, for having us here today.
Thank you.